There we go. Is this on? It's always just as weird. Start talking to nobody, basically. To no one. Oh, TITC, full touring car dude now. Even got the shirt. How do we get over 100 people here? How do we do that for Onroad? Where are the comments? Do we have sound? Yes. Sound is good. Maybe share this with some on-road nerds so we get more people. We have 69 people. Nice. Hopefully there are some touring car people here and not just the off-road guides. Uh, 74. We need to share this because I can't start really if we don't have more than 100 people. It's a new rule. On-road requires more than 100 people. Okay, we definitely have an on-road person here. Nitro on-road guy here, but I also occasionally do some electric touring car. Good. And another touring car guy. Good. He's very good. So not a waste of time. Let me find we need to show some chassis focus. I need to find it. Oh, here's one. And another. So for now, until we reach 100 people, you can just ask questions in the chat and I might answer them. And if you ask with a super chat, then I will answer them because I'll see it. And the super chats go towards a beer fund. So when I have a live, I can have a beer. That's the idea. But now, jet lagged, all kinds of issues, need a coffee. I forgot to put those lights on. Let's see if it makes a difference. Oh, yeah, see? Separation from the background. Many touring car people here. Good. Schumacher driver. I use SolidWorks for the CAD stuff. And 2D drawing for the roll centers. I'll show you that later on. Okay, Adam Garner says, I'm here, we can start now. Well, 83 people, so if you share this with your friends, we need a few more people, then we can start. Until then, Q&A. How much beer did both you and Pekko drink at TITC? Which was your favorite? Asahi. Asahi beer was my favorite, and quite a few beers. I'm not sure how many. Nothing too crazy, though. Planning on trying touring car on asphalt, carbon chassis, Schumacher MI9. Any others I should consider? I don't know about the chassis, actually. If it's... I don't think anyone was running carbon over there. I don't know why. Maybe because it's high grip. I don't know. I would think the steel chassis is going to be the way to go everywhere once those are fully developed. So I don't know. For sure, the Schumacher is a good car. I don't know if you want carbon or the alloy one for asphalt. Is the beer consumption in off-road or on-road higher? I would say in off-road it's higher, based on my experience at that race. Does YouTube tax the beer fund? Yes. YouTube takes like 40% or something of the super chats, so not very good. Are you excited to go back to DNC? I'm excited to race 8-scale off-road again, but DNC is the worst race after PMB, so not super excited that it's DNC, but it's nice to go back and race some nitro. Yeah, we have some touring car people here. We have Hunter Lawrence right now, 96 people. So we need Josh Hansen, 100. Or Tommy Searle. Then we can start. I made some notes, actually. So prepared. Did you see any of X-Ray drivers chatting with others in the pits? Is this some kind of running joke? I saw them chatting with me and Pekko. That's about it, actually. Maybe they were just in the not container, but private room. I went to steal their air conditioning a bit. So, still Hunter Lawrence 96. Maybe share this on some on-road Facebook page so we get more people. This is the day touring car drivers learn setup. Yes, it is. This is the beginning. This is possible. 99 people. 104. Okay, we can start after this. Someone says, I have a feeling that beer consumption in 8-scale nitro on-road at least matches nitro off-road. That is possible. Did I convince Orlovsky to come run a Mayako at DNC? No, because of Schumacher. Those bastards. They don't want to let him run anything else. So, no Mayako for Mihal. Okay, so we have to start. TITC. TITC. Do we have a nice picture of the facility here? Let me show you what's up. Actually, that reminds me, I need that one final under the hood or chassis focus. What is it called? TITC. Why did I go there? Well, it was because, you know, the Invisible Speed book I have, I'm going to write one for on-road. And I figured I need to go to a race, on-road race, so I have a bit more experience, and also that I can show myself and the brand and start to get people to realize that, hey, I'm actually going to do something in on-road. And TITC, the timing was good, and it was good because they have, basically the track is open for weeks before the race. So it's possible to go there, get a few days of practice in, and then do the race. Also, it's in Thailand, so the weather's good, and the price level is cheap. The hotel was not bad at all. Food is affordable. It's possible to go there for a longer time, get track time in on the racetrack, and then do the race. And based on all the feedback I'd heard, the race is also fun. So it's sort of a big event. All the best drivers are there, but it's kind of laid back. You get a lot of track time, It's a fun atmosphere. So we decided to go with Pekko, and I'm very happy I did. Anyway, that's the background. That's why I went there. And another reason why it was good to go here is because I heard that it's a very difficult race, that the surface is tricky because it's high grip and bumpy and people struggle with setup and the track changes throughout the day. So I thought, okay, this is the perfect situation to go and try, like basically go and verify and make sure that my ideas work. That was the thinking. What else? Where can I get the book? Well, you can get the book that I have currently, which is based on 8-scale off-road. Of course, the theory is the same. We're going to talk about that here soon. But you can get it on invisiblespeed.net. And the on-road version by the end of the year. We actually have a bet. If I don't get the book released by the end of the year, I have to pay Pekko's rent for a full year. So rest assured, the book will be released during this year. There we go. There was a question about that. By the end of the year. How many sets of tires did you use over the whole time you've been there? Well, I ran Pekko's one-run tires for practice. I only ran new tires, I think in seeding. So I didn't really practice with any new tires. And then I had I think 7 sets of new tires. But the top guys, I think they must have gone through like 40 sets of tires or something like that. It's crazy in on-road. You only really can get 2 runs out of a set. What was going through your mind before approaching Orlovsky for the first time to present your desire to try assist him with some setup ideas? Well, we'll get more into detail on that later, but because Pekko runs Schumacher, like Mihail, me and Pekko tried everything first. And in practice, Pekko was really fast. He actually matched the top guys. There was a point when he was really on pace with the others. And of course, Mihail saw that. Pekko was fast. And in practice, I said, okay, I have a few things that you could try. The only thing we did was check his roll centers, all the shims, and I made some suggestions for what he could do. That was the only thing we really did in practice. And then it rained towards the end of practice, so he never got to try the things I wanted actually in practice. And then in the race, he actually started asking me my opinion between rounds, just for changes that he was planning on making. And then once TQ was secured, he wanted to try the things that I wanted him to try, or in practice, because there was really nothing to lose. So it was that's kind of how it happened. For the on-road version, we are going to make it in German also, because of Tony Sport and touring car being so big. Touring car being so big in Germany and Austria. So there are a lot of German speakers running touring car. And I believe it will be worth translating. What is the one or few setup concepts that you've noticed that actually do not seem to translate over from off-road buggy to touring car setup? Nothing. Everything translates over. Physics is physics. We want some different things, but it all makes sense the same. Questions are coming in. I'll just deal with these and then we start properly. In your Red RC post, you said that the roll centers needs to be below the ground. Why specifically below the ground? I will explain this. I will explain this at the end of this live. So first, we'll talk about the race itself and a few of the different cars I saw who impressed, like what cars impressed me and drivers and that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about the changes we made for Mihail and the changes I made for Mark Reinhard for A3. And then we'll, at the end of that, we've already spoken about the setup things. Then we go into the theory and why those things work the way they do. So that's where I'll explain that. So only the people who really care about the theory and want to learn more, they can stick around for the end. And everyone else, they get the juicy details without the theory. Is that okay? I hope so. So we could start with some basic setup stuff, but I want to mention one thing. I'm going to start a new movement. And what I want to do is, because I've wanted to go to a big touring car race for a while now, and I've almost gone to some ETS races, but I haven't. And one of the reasons is that I've seen the schedule for the ETSs. And the problem is they start really early in the morning and are done really late at night. And there's like 5 hours between your runs or something like that. One thing that they did at TITC, which is great, and it's something that I've been lobbying for before, is that when you have multiple classes, group them so that if you run, for example, modified, then you don't have to be there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever, if it's a long day. Your class will run, for example, in the morning or in the day slot or in the evening slot. That's something that ETS should do also. They have multiple classes, make groups out of them, make it so the gaps between rounds is about 2 hours maybe, or 2.5 hours, something like that. And then it's a lot more manageable for people. They don't have to be there from early in the morning to late at night. And that's something they did here at TITC with open brushless and modified running together, and then rally class and stock running together. So they separated them. And that made for a much nicer schedule where we didn't have to be at the track all day long unless we wanted to. So definitely something that ETS should look into. And then I'm hoping to go. So hopefully they implement this change before I go to an ETS so I don't have to be there from morning to evening. Amazing. That was a good idea. Anyway, basic setup. Let's take a look here. I have a few pictures to show you because this is important. How do I do this now? I'm out of practice. I have not been doing these lives. I don't even know if, let's check. Settings. Yeah, it's at least it's the correct microphone. That's good. And you can see me, I believe. That's good. Now, share an image. Okay. Oh, this is weird. Why does it do it like that? Okay, that's pretty strange. I need to figure out how to work this. Open. What? Where's the, where do you make it full screen? Like that. But, okay. Let's try again. Present. What? Here we go. These are weird. They've changed these layout things. Don't make any sense. I don't know. Well, you don't need to see me. Okay. Anyone still here? So, touring car, base setting. Most beautiful car at the race was actually this one, mine. My paint job works really well on a touring car, I think. Amazing. Okay, now we get to the first bit of controversy. So, I remember back in the day when I was kind of trying to learn this theory side of things, and what I would do is I would help some touring car drivers like Mark Reinhardt or Ronnefal, Cargberry. There were a few drivers that I would message and sort of recommend setups for. And I remember back then there was already some pushback, and some people were saying like, you can't set up a car with a computer. That doesn't make any sense. Blah 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 blah. This kind of attitude, like what I was doing was not making any sense. Well, I will prove that it does make sense. And it will take a while, I know, but that's one of my goals. And I'll just say this, like, if you think that the way to set a car up is to go to the track and then just through iteration, trying different setups, and that's how you do it, that's fine. You can do it that way, but no professional racing industry does it like that. Do you like? Even we were talking about this with Becco, and he said, like, why do you think they have computers in F1? Like, what are they doing there? Why are they checking stuff in their CAD software and simulating stuff? Why would they do that? If what you actually need to do is go and drive around the track and then change a setting, and then no, you need both. But where you start is with the theory and knowledge and understanding, creating a base. And then you have a few different directions to go with your setup, which you understand on a theoretical level, and then you try them on the track. So you need a base first, then you do testing in real life. You cannot go all the way on a computer, but you also cannot go all the way by only testing at the track. You need to combine both. I am 100% sure of that, and I'll give you some examples here. Even tonight, but also in the future, and plenty then in the book when it's done. But disclaimer, because now we are dealing with a new audience, on-road people. On-road people, maybe they don't know who the hell I am. That could be a good thing. That could be a very good thing. But we have to establish something first. Because usually what happens is I manage to piss a lot of people off. Then they tune out. They don't listen to me. They think I'm an idiot. I manage to come across in a sort of bad way, as if I'm very arrogant, or that I know best. I don't listen to anyone else, or that it's that I believe that I'm always right, or all these kind of negative ways of coming across. And I just want to explain that mostly none of that is really true, not in the sense that people think. And the reason is that, to cut a very long story short, I've spent most of my life using work and a sort of singular focus as a way of escaping reality without knowing it. It's just that from a young age, I realized that, fuck, this world we live in, it's a bit of a nightmare. But if I do this, this is fun. And I enjoy it. I enjoy myself. I enjoy doing this. And that's all I did. And only recently, approaching 40 years old, I realized, like, holy shit, like, there's other things in life too. And none of those things are actually going well. So there's something wrong here. I need to sort of find a different balance to my life. The reason I'm saying this, the reason I'm explaining this, that most people watching here, or most people who have an opinion about what I say, they have not done that. They have not spent the same amount of time and effort trying to learn to understand roll centers or how a car works or all the different settings in a car. I guarantee you haven't done that, because probably you are more sane than me. But I have spent that time and I have done that work. And that's why I speak car now. It's taken more than 20 years, but I speak the language. Okay. So that's why when we talk about things that I know a lot about, because I have put in the work, it may seem that I am the kind of person that I believe I know right, that I am right, and I don't listen to others. That's why it may seem that way. So if we talk about a subject I don't know about, it's not going to be the same experience, because I don't have a problem admitting if I don't know something. So I just want to make this clear that I put a lot of effort into this, and that's why I know about it. Okay? It's not something where I just think I know and I'm confidently say it. If I say something confidently, it's because I know it. Now, am I always right? No, because it happens many times where I believe that I understand something, and then I learn more and I realize, oh, I didn't have the full picture. I need to go back and rethink this and explain it in a better way in the future, for example. But these things that we are talking about now, these are like really established. These are sort of the basic building blocks by which you design and then set a car up. So these things that I explained today, I know that I know them, right? The facts, the reality that I'm going to talk about today, it's non-negotiable. The part where you can have opinions is then, what do you do with those facts? So how do you design the car? How do you set it up? That's the part where opinions come in. But the basic things like what are we doing and why, those are facts. And I think that you shouldn't have the mindset that we all have our own truth or we all have our own reality. No, we don't. We share reality. We have to agree on that. And then we can have opinions. Doesn't make sense. And I just wanted to give this disclaimer because I know that I function differently, okay? I know that I have put in this effort because, you know, ADHD and ASD and all of that stuff, right? I know that. I understand that. I accept that now. I just want all of you watching to sort of have the background to know that this here isn't some, like, how can I say, it's not bullshit, basically. This was from the Red RC report when I was doing some setups in the pits. And yeah, we had some success actually. Was able to help Mihail also for Q4 and for the mains. And Pekko played a big part also because some of the ideas are his, and also he tests a lot of the things. And he doesn't really care. He'll just put stuff on his car and try it. So let's talk about the very base setup first. So maybe we can look at Mihal's car here. I know the setup on that. Let's see. Red RC chassis. You see that, hopefully. Okay, so when you go to a track like this one, so high grip, bumpy, people said that the traction levels change a lot throughout the day. It's basically, I got the vibe and understood that this is a difficult track for touring car. We'll talk about it more in the theory part, but the reason I showed you those pictures of me with a computer looking at the roll centers and stuff is because that's, I think, vital. That's what you have to do. We'll talk about it when we talk about Infinity, for example, and X-Ray a bit later on. We'll talk about why it's important. But you have to know where the roll centers are. You, as a designer, you have to know, okay, I want them here. This is the base of the car. Why do you need to do that? Because at the sort of handling limit of a car, something will happen. If you don't know where your roll centers are and if they are messed up, that whatever that thing is that happens is unpredictable. So when you know where your roll centers are and you place them in a certain way, at the limit of performance, the car will handle predictably. It will have a slight push. It will slide with all four tires. It will be sort of, you will lose time if you go too fast, but you won't lose control. Okay, so that's the base. But then there are some basic ideas you have to decide on. And if we look at Mihal's car here, one is very obvious. And I was surprised that no one picked up on this at the race. Long links. So the links are actually attached to the bulkheads. Why would you want long links? Well, when you have longer links, everything slows down a bit. The response of the car, I mean, the car is not as responsive as with the standard link positions, which are probably somewhere out here. So longer links slow down the response of the car. Why is this important? Okay. I have to include a bit of theory here. I just have to, okay? Because this is something that I noticed that people do not really, at least the people that I spoke to and heard speaking, they do not address this or talk about this in a, to me, sensible way, okay? So I'm going to have to show a part of my book. Here. Grip. When we talk about grip, you see the graph here? This is key. We can't just talk about more grip or less grip. We have to talk about initial grip and overall grip. Initial grip would be response. It's that first, the first and fastest traction a car gets when you do something. You turn into a corner, you accelerate or you brake. That initial grip. The more initial grip you have, the higher level, the maximum amount of traction the car can have. right? So it's a high peak of traction, but you only have that for a short time. So as a driver, you would constantly have to be driving the car, right? You turn in, you correct, you straighten out, you're always doing something, because you can't leave the car to its own devices, because after that maximum amount of grip, you lose it, right? So initial grip is a high peak of traction, but you lose it quickly. Overall grip is grip that builds more over time. So the peak isn't as high. You don't reach the maximum amount of traction as quickly, but the peak is wider. You don't suddenly lose traction. So the car is not as responsive. So basically, if you can see this graph here, with short links, you have more initial grip. The car builds a high level of grip traction quickly, but you also lose it quickly. That's with short links. So a lot of initial grip. With long links, you slow down the build-up of traction, but the peak is wider. You as a driver have more time to react to any changes. You have more overall grip. Less initial grip, more overall grip. I hope this makes sense so far. So that's the reason we had long links on Mihal's car. Because on a difficult track, on a high grip, edgy track, you want the car to be easier to drive. You give yourself time by having long links. What about something else? Another basic thing, another really basic thing that actually Mihal was different from me and Pekko, a thick rear diffoil. So when you have a thicker rear diffoil, off power, the car is more stable. So going into corners, you have better rear traction. Through corners, you have better rear traction. Then on power, you have more drive. On power, you can lose rear traction, or the rear can sort of slide out, or the car can fishtail a bit. But on a very high grip track, that's not normally a problem. So having a thicker rear diffoil made the car more stable, off power entering corners, and gave it more drive out of corners. And it was clearly faster. I said Mihal was different, and that's because he didn't run a lot of towing. He only ran like 2.1, something like that, like a low amount of towing. And me and Pekko, we ran 3 degrees. So opposite kind of thinking. So Mihal had a thinner rear diffoil because he had less towing. And we'll talk about that later on when we talk about the changes we made on his car. Then another thing, something that I've learned from off-road, is to do with the shocks. So when you are on a track that is difficult and the car is responsive and traction is inconsistent, and maybe the traction changes between runs, you want to make the car easier to drive. So one thing was the long links, right? Longer links, they slow down the responsiveness of the car. You have less initial grip, more overall grip. Another way to help do the same thing is by changing your pistons. And I spoke with a number of people, and they don't really change their pistons that much. There's that PSS system that X-Ray has. So they have a sleeve inside the shock with slots in it, and it kind of makes progressive damping. The oil passes past the piston in that slot, and the slot is triangular in shape. Then the people who run normal pistons, they seem to be running like 4-hole 1.1, and that's it, 450 oil or whatever it was, right? I'm like, okay, well, I think that we should be running more holes and thicker oil. because then you can run a damping field that's very thick. So the damping is slow, but then the pack feeling is similar. So you don't have too much pack where the car is responsive, and you don't have too little where it's sort of very low response, imprecise, and soft feeling. So we tested with Beko. We went to 5-hole 1.1 and thicker oil, and then 6-hole 1.1 and even thicker oil, like 750 and 800. And the 6-hole with 800 oil, it gave the car more overall grip, a higher level of overall grip, and the car was really stable to drive. So it was a no-brainer to sort of go to those pistons. Okay, why? Why would we want to slow down the damping? Why does that work? Well, I just want to share just a bit of theory now, because it's really important. Okay, and it's another thing that I noticed that people misunderstand. So I'm going to show another part of my book just to make this clear. This is one thing that's good with off-road. You can see these things. In touring car, it's difficult to see these things and really understand them. But with an off-road car, it's easy. I'll show you right now. Here we go. So we have to address this. So you see here, the car is accelerating, the rear is squatting down, braking, the front is diving, and the rear wheel is actually off the ground here. Cornering, the car rolls onto the outside tires. Here you see an extreme case here again, really rolling onto the front. Rear tire even off the track. Here, the car is also rolling, but sort of to a lesser degree. So you see that when you drive around the track, the chassis moves. The suspension allows the chassis to roll and dive and squat. And the thing that people misunderstand is that they think that the more the chassis moves, the more load is transferring. And that's wrong. And that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Okay. Reality is that what we are adjusting is load transfer. Okay. So if we go back here to wherever it was where I had the graph. Where is it? Here. So we spoke about initial grip being a high peak of traction, and then overall grip, not as high peak. You reach it slower, but it's wider. So red, initial grip, green, overall grip. When we think about suspension and chassis movements, if you don't have suspension at all, like a go-kart, for example, you will have a lot of initial grip. When you have suspension, the slower you make the damping, the softer spring you have, the more you allow the car to roll and move, the more overall grip you have, the less initial grip you have. This is the key point you have to understand. This is really, really super basic. If you get this point, you will be able to make better choices and decisions setting up your car. Everything starts from this idea of initial grip, a high peak of traction that you get quickly, overall grip, a lower maximum peak of traction, but you reach it slower and you lose it later, so you have more time. So when we go back here and look at the chassis moving, squatting, diving on the front, rolling, The chassis movements give the driver and the car, the tires, time to react to any changes. So the more that the chassis can move, when we added 2 holes, we ran 6 hole 1.1 and 800 oil. It meant that the suspension damping was slow. It was sort of a thick feeling suspension. So driving around the track, it added some time where the chassis was still rolling, where the front was diving, where instead of load transferring quickly off some tires onto other tires, the movement of the chassis delayed it. So driving the car, you feel that it's not as aggressive and it doesn't respond as quickly. And that made it easier to drive. So this was a sort of no-brainer that I thought, okay, well, we always do this in off-road, so I might as well try it in on-road. And it worked. One more thing. Here in these pictures, you can see it. So everything has a limit. Everything is a compromise. We want to allow the chassis to move to give us time. So the car isn't too responsive, so that in a corner, the car maintains traction for longer. You don't have to drive as precise before you lose grip, right? But there's a limit to it. Like if you allow the car to move too much, it's going to move outside of what I would call the working range. So it dives too much. A tire is off the ground. Like this is outside of the working range. The car is not performing at its best. Below, you see a car which is within the working range. All tires on the ground, camber angles are reasonable. So this would be a car performing at a higher level than the one above because the setup is better, right? So you want to allow the chassis to move, but you don't want to allow it to move too much. Does that make sense? And in touring car, it's hard to see. It's hard to visually see these kind of things. So I think there's a benefit to learning about these things in off-road where you can really visually see the car move around and you can sort of learn about these changes more easily, I would say. And then when you understand them and when you apply them in touring car, you notice the change in feel, but visually you can't see it. You would not know that, oh, that chassis is rolling more or it's rolling less. It's very hard to see that. And I think that's why often on-road drivers, even really top drivers, they have the wrong idea of what's actually happening. So when I listen to feedback, I don't care about what they think is happening or what they say. No, I only care about what they feel. Because I've noticed that very often they will say that something is rolling more or less, and they are saying the exact opposite of what happens. So it's more important to focus on the feeling. But like I said, in off-road, it's easier. You can literally see a wheel off the ground or a car rolling a lot or a little. Okay. Let's see. I haven't really checked the comments. Does it matter if you lengthen the links on the inside or outside? Yes, it does. And all touring cars kind of have the links in line with the lower arm on the outside already. So you wouldn't want to lengthen it there. You lengthen it on the inside. So the longer link allows the car to roll more. A long link makes the geometry of the car softer, allowing for more roll, allowing for more time for the car to roll instead of transferring load. So load transfer happens quicker when you have no suspension on a go-kart, or quicker when you have stiff geometry, hard springs, a thick anti-roll bar, when you limit the roll of the chassis, when you have small pistons, small holes in the pistons, and a lot of pack. It makes the car respond faster. Because why? Because load is transferring quickly. The opposite, so soft geometry, soft springs, slow damping, less pack, thin anti-roll bars, all of these things that allow the chassis to move more, they delay load transfer. Suspension movements delay load transfer. The exact opposite of what many things, or what many people say. Very important. Longer links do soften the roll stiffness, right? Therefore, the car has slower response and is, of course, more predictable. Yes. And another thing that I tested actually there was, well, we ended up running softer springs in the front than the rear, which I think I've always run harder springs in the front than rear in touring car. And the setups I've seen, I think they also have harder springs in the front, softer in the rear. But we actually had softer springs in the front and harder springs in the rear. And that was because the car wasn't as responsive. But then on a high grip track, getting on power and driving hard through corners, the rear had enough support where it didn't roll too much. And then also I tried a stood up shock on the front shock tower with a softer roll bar, and then laid down shock on the front tower with a harder roll bar. So those are opposite changes. Like when you stand the front shock up, it's firmer, more stiff, faster load transfer, more responsive, and the soft roll bar compensates for that. And then vice versa, laying down the shock, softer suspension, more roll, less response. But then to not have the car roll too much, you put a harder anti-roll bar on. That was actually the preferred setting then, the laid down shock and the harder roll bar. So the changes that we made, how to think about those changes. I will have to show you yet another thing from my book. Here. We have to look at that. We have Pekko from a few years ago. We have to think about sort of the different sections of a corner. This is another thing. So let's recap. I noticed people talk about grip, more grip, less grip. That doesn't make any sense. You have to separate between initial grip and overall grip. Initial is the first response. You lose it quickly. Overall is more easy to drive traction, the overall traction. How do we talk about this more sensibly? We think about a corner. On corner entry, initial grip is what makes a corner initial grip is what makes a car enter a corner with traction. It is a change. You're going straight, then you want to turn. So on corner entry, initial grip is what determines how well a car enters a corner, right? Mid corner. So you enter the corner, and then there's this section mid corner where most likely you are sort of off power turning, and then at some point you get on power again. And mostly rotation happens in tight corners off power, like hairpins. It's off power, the car rotates, and the end of the rotation might be when you get on power, something like that. So in the middle of a corner, if your car setup has a lot of initial grip, in the middle of the corner, you'll lose traction. Do you remember the graph? Where's the graph? Here. You go into a corner, boom, you have a lot of traction, but then you lose grip quickly, right? So mid corner, you start losing grip. And then when you get on power and you straighten out, boom, you have grip again. So A car with a lot of initial grip is going to be very responsive into a corner. Mid corner is where you might struggle, and then getting on power again, you catch the car again. Are you going? So it's a car with a lot of initial grip is sort of good for someone who drives very point and shoot. Overall grip going in, overall grip, if that's how you have set your car is kind of numb going in. Mid corner, you have good traction. It maintains traction throughout the corner very well. And then when you get on power again, there's no spike in traction. It's very neutral. So it's easier to navigate the track, drive through a corner with a car that has more overall grip. Because going in, you have medium traction. Mid corner, you have medium to high grip. That you feel like you have more traction compared to other settings when you have a lot of overall grip. And then going out, medium again. So with initial grip, driving around the track, you feel distinct differences of now I have grip, now I don't. Now I have grip again. Overall grip is smoother transitions. So this is why we can't really talk about grip as just I have good grip, I have bad grip, because different skill level drivers will feel different traction levels with the same exact car. Bruno Coelho can drive a car which is difficult to drive. It has, let's say, a lot of initial grip, and if I would drive it, I'd be like doing donuts out there and spinning out mid corner and losing the rear and struggling. And he can drive it fast. Why? Because he goes out there, he does a lap, and he adapts. He has that talent, high level of skill, high level of talent. And whatever the car does, he compensates with his driving. So if there's an issue of low traction mid corner, he will compensate by using the throttle, slowing down earlier, driving through the corner differently, using the steering. The inputs from his radio, he masks the problem of the car. I'm not able to do that, so I would be doing donuts. Do you understand? So it doesn't have to be a problem. It can also be a good handling car, but it's perfected for a particular driver. A driver might prefer a car that's very responsive, and he likes to rotate the car very quickly, and he likes to drive the car constantly and have too much steering and not use a lot of wheel input. And that could be something which is, well, I know for a fact that is the kind of setup that's very fast for the world's best drivers, but almost undrivable for most people. And it has to do with this initial grip versus overall grip. Normal humans should not run the same setups as professional drivers because the skill level is so different. The setup sheet of Bruno Coelho or even Mihail, it's worthless, really. It's worthless for most people because they are so good. They are too good. We cannot do what they do. Okay? So it doesn't make sense to try and copy them. Okay, let's get back to the changes we made. I will show Mihal's car again because we made some changes there in the race. Here. Okay. Let me think now. So yeah, Mihal had already TQ'd. He TQ'd the first 3 rounds of qualifying. Then there was a 4th round of qualifying. And he knew that I had some different shocks and he wanted to try them. So we tried that for the Q4. And one thing I learned actually is I underestimate the skill level of the drivers. So I would make the car too easy to drive for them, right? So he tried the shocks, and we also adjusted some front toe out and bump steer and rear toe settings. And I think that I was too conservative, because in the last qualifying round, he said his car was too easy to drive. He felt like the shocks had more potential, but he just TQ'd by 1/10 of a second, actually. And he started off a bit slower because he said the car was pushing and he had to turn the wheel too much and it was upsetting the car. And then later on in the run, it was better. And then for for A1, so qualifying was done. He had tried the sort of setup ideas I gave him, and he did TQ, but it was really close. And then for A1, he asked me my opinion for the changes we should make. And about the shocks, I just asked him basically that which ones were easier to run? The one you've been running the whole race, or these ones I gave you? And he said, these ones that you gave me, I feel more comfortable, but my pace wasn't as good. I said, I don't care about the pace. I care about how they feel. Do you feel that it's easier? Which one is easier? And he said that these shocks that you gave me now, this makes the car easier to drive. So I said, okay, now what we need to do is we need to give the car some more steering so you don't have to turn the wheel as much. And if you don't turn the wheel as much, the car won't be as upset and it will be faster. And you won't lose as much speed because you aren't turning the tires as much. The less you can turn the front wheels in touring car, the faster you'll be. So one thing that we had played around with a bit already before was front toe out, because sometimes Michal said that, oh, he needs more steering, or he needs the car to be a bit easier to drive, and he wanted to make sort of bigger changes. And all I suggested was, no, just change your toe out, just change that, and not much, like literally like 0.1 or 0.2 on the gauge. Like you barely see it moving. You are not even looking anymore at half a degree or the thickness of the line. It's like a tiny change. So what we changed from Q4 to A1 was 0.5 millimeter of bump steer here to make it more aggressive. So removed 0.5 mil shim from here, which means that he had neutral bump steer, and now removing the shim on compression, the outside tire would turn a bit more. And I can't remember now if he had changed the toe setting to a bit more toe out for Q4, and then we went back on that also. Maybe that might be the case, but it was literally, again, 0.1. It was like such a small change. But just by doing that, giving the front a bit more aggressive steering, that was enough to where he now didn't have to turn the wheel as much. He felt that the car had the response it needed, and suddenly he was clearly faster in A1. Like the gap would have been 4 seconds, but he slowed down right at the end for the last laps. But he still won with over 3 seconds. And the change between qualifying and the main, where a number of drivers were saying that the track was so different and the car was so different, literally 0.5 millimeter in bump steer shim and some alignment changes to go with that feeling. Like we need a bit more steering, but we still need rear traction. Okay, let's not change the rear. Let's just add some grip to the front. Tiny things, right? And that's like, that was all that was needed. Then toe-in. I want to talk a bit about toe-in. So one difference was the long links for Michal. at this race. He had long links. The competition that I saw, they all had shorter links. So for sure, his car had more overall grip. He had more margin, in a sense, margin of error, but also he had a car which was more forgiving on the tires. More about that when we talk about the changes we made for Reinhard's car in A3. But the rear, so Michal ran just around 2 degrees of toe-in, and the less toe-in you can run, the faster your car can be, the more natural corner speed you have. I think that this was one reason also why he was fast, because he had a setup that had enough traction for him to run less rear toe-in. So I really think that helped him. And then, yeah, our shock setup too helped in the end, because all these things really, like less, small amount of toe out, a small amount of toe in, long links, heavy damping, but sort of slow heavy damping, slowing down load transfer in the car. They all preserve tires. And something I learned in touring car is that it's a big deal. You lose speed if you push the tires too much in the run. You lose traction. Your lap time starts increasing. And that's something that you can combat by driving smoother, driving differently. But the best way is with setup. So the best way is to come up with a setup that is easier on the tires. And slowing down load transfer is a way to be easier on the tires. And now we get to Mark Reinhard, because Michal had won the race already. He won A1 and he won A2. So he was done. Now second place was up for grabs. So Bruno had finished second in both finals and Mark third. But if Mark would win the last final, then he would be second and Bruno would be third. Now, Mark is Michal's teammate on Coyote, but also I've helped Mark in the past with some setup ideas when I was sort of learning about this stuff. And I felt like I would be able to make a difference. And he was willing to try some stuff. So I said, okay, bring me your car. I'm going to check the setup. So the first thing I did was drew his roll centers. And I saw that there was like a big imbalance front to rear. When there is an imbalance, I think that the car doesn't naturally want to flow around the track. You have to drive it more. So I evened out the front and rear roll centers a bit. He had to raise the front arm, I think, 0.5 mil, the front lower arm, 0.5 mil, and change the upper link a bit, and got the roll centers sort of more in sync. Then I said also he has the option of going to a longer link on the automatic. So I said, go to the longer link. And then also wider hexes. So to put like 0.5 mil shims on all hexes, front and rear. Because when you have a wider track width, that also limits load transfer, which is good. The whole point of all these changes was to try and make it so Mark's car would be faster at the end of the race. Then I also asked him about the feeling and the steering and like, does he prefer it if he has a car that has a lot of steering and he has sort of extra steering in reserve, or does he want it to always have a rear grip, or what does he prefer? How does he want it to feel? And then I changed the alignment just on the setup station slightly to match that better, right? So the changes were not big, but there was a point to them. All the changes I made, the point was to make the car comfortable for him, how he wants to drive it, and to make sure that at the end of the final, he would have an advantage over Bruno. Because throughout the race, I had noticed that Bruno would start strong and he would fade. And in the finals, the same things happened. But in the finals, Mark also faded. So that was the strategy in the changes, and it worked, because if you saw A3, you saw that, and I even told Mark this, I said, just be safe and stay close, because in the last minute, you will be faster, and that's when you'll pass him. And that's exactly what happened. So that was another thing where I was really happy, actually, because I was quite confident that I was right, but how could I know? Like, I couldn't be sure. This was now a driver I hadn't been working with, a car that I didn't drive. So this was purely, does the theory match reality? And it did, because you saw A3. In the end, Mark caught up to Bruno. He was right on him, and he passed on the last lap, second to last corner. Then he messed up the last corner. Damn. So anyway, for me, it was just nice to see that it worked. It made a difference. Anything else on that? Wait, we have some comments here. I'll catch up with the comments a bit, and then we'll go on to talk about a couple of cars. Yeah, we'll talk about the Axon and the Infinity. We'll talk about those. Axon and Infinity. But first, a few comments here. What's your opinion of KPI, or have you played with it on an on-road car? I don't think any of the touring cars have KPI, but I actually think that it would be good. I really do. Rear toe. Yeah, then I commented on it. This was probably before I did, but I think the less rear toe you can run, the faster the car can naturally be. But you have to sort of build your setup around it. And also, you do have to be a smoother driver. Yes. Isn't a heavy damping acting more like a go-kart because the roll force transferred instantly to the tire? Or am I thinking outside the working range? Okay. So this is why you need to change the piston. So if you have the same piston and you just go to a harder oil, then let's say if you are in the right range of oil, when you start to go harder, yes, you get to that point where it's so hard that you are now transferring load quicker. You're losing sort of overall grip because of that. Yes. But the key here is to understand that when you add holes to the piston, when you change the piston and you have thick oil, the damping still works and moves, but it moves at a slower pace. It's slower. That's key. So there is sort of a sweet spot, let's say, where you are not limiting the movement because the damping is too thick or too hard. The force required to move it is not too high, but it is moving slower. That's what you want to achieve. And that's where sort of real life testing comes in. That's where you have to try different combinations of pistons and oils and figure out like what is the right setting so that you have a car that the damping is thick and slow, but the force required to move it is not too high, where this happens, where you say thick damping is going towards a go-kart where load transfer is fast. Does that make sense? So the suspension moved, but at a slower rate than with the four-hole 1.1 and thinner oil. How important, crucial do you think tire management and prep? I mean, it is very important in touring car. And that's something that impressed me, actually, was the level of knowledge when it comes to something like that. Okay, use this tire source, apply it for this long, then put the tire warmers on for this amount of time at this temperature. Like that is what requires experience. So you've tested and you know that this works. Okay, definitely their experience is key. But then when it comes to something like car setup, we'll talk about this in a moment when we talk about Bruno and Infinity. Their experience is great, but you have to base it on knowledge and understanding. You have to. Like, if I was developing a tire, then I need to understand the chemical composition of the rubber and the additive and all of those things. I have to really understand it, right? If I'm just a racer, I just need to test the different additives, test different temperatures and times of prep and all of that, and then find the best. Those are two different things. If you are a car brand and you want to have a good setup, you have to know the base of the car, the design of the car, and then drivers test different roll bars, different springs, different droop settings, and all of those things, right? But they need a base that is built on understanding. Like a too soft damping and the roll of the chassis happens too fast. So the load transfer happens too fast. Yes, exactly. Nowadays, it's always harder springs rear than front, i.e. look how more inside the shocks are compared to the rear. The more inside the shocks are, you would have to actually run a harder spring to make up for that. So this kind of comment is a bit backwards. Could you explain the difference between lowering lower arms and making longer upper links? I can, but I'm not going to do it now. But let's see. We might still, if there's a lot of people here. If there's a lot of people here, we could go into the theory a bit at the end of this, like I said, because I decided I included it there because it was so relevant. Okay. This is probably about the bump steer, so it depends on the design of the car. So on the Schumacher, the shims are above, the ball is above the plate. So there we remove the shim to make it bump in. On the automatics, it's the opposite. So you would add a shim to make it bump in. So it depends on the car design itself. It's not like that. And actually, that reminds me, this is another thing that racers would say is when I would ask for their bump steer, they would say how many shims they have there. And that's fucking irrelevant because bump steer depends on the rest of the car setup. So you can't, it doesn't matter how many shims it is. You put it on the setup station and you look. That's how you know your bump steer. Because if you run different roll center settings, your bump steer will be different. So you have to look on the setup station. The amount of shims is irrelevant. It's like asking what shock oil do you run and not knowing the piston. Come on. How do you go about measuring and drawing the roll centers of a car you haven't seen before? I presume you have a template set up to use. Well, you have to have seen the car and you have to have the measurements. And I had the measurements. Oh, yay. I just didn't have the car and hadn't thought about it at the race. How can you measure the link of the car precisely to put then in SolidWorks? I mean, it's a pain in the ass to do, but you have to measure and find different ways to make precise measurements. You can figure it out with a flat surface and calipers. We drilled holes into the existing 4-hole piston. Okay, we caught up with the comments. Now we need to talk about a couple of cars. Okay. First, I want to talk about something that impressed me. Okay. And it is this. The Axon. This is Akio Sobue's Axon. And the first time I saw this was actually when I was doing my extra practice runs. So the top heats would go out. I would take my radio and go up on the balcony and drive people's cars. And people would laugh at me, but I didn't give a shit because this is a really good way of doing it. When you fake drive someone's car, you can actually get into the zone, literally. You feel like you're driving the car. Yes. Not with all drivers, but with many of the top guys. If you're a decent driver, you can get to the point where you kind of feel like you're actually driving their car. And the smoothest driver of all was Akio. He was like so smooth, it's crazy. Like it didn't look fast even in some sections, but he was really fast. And then the thing that made it impressive is that same car, Axon, there was the other guy. Was it Hayato? And he's the most aggressive driver I've ever seen, and I was not able to drive his car at all. It was insane. But they drove the same car, and they both made the main. Okay? So then after the race, I went to look at the car, and it's pretty impressive. And there are a few things that I want to comment on. One is this. They had aluminium lower arms and a sort of C-hub, almost like a off-road buggy C-hub design. So I am a fan of that. I think that's a good idea. One reason is that you can change the offset and you can run a longer arm into the wheel. And another is that you don't need a lot of weight up here. You can do with just an upper link. And then the stiffness is there because of the aluminium arm and the outer hinge pin. So this setup is as stiff and firm as the other cars, which have sort of double links, heavier. There's more material needed here on the bulkhead and all that stuff. So this is light, less weight up high, and more options for adjustability, which I like. So I think that's a really good design. Okay, this isn't very cool because the joint isn't in line with the kingpin, but they said they were fixing that, I believe. Yeah, so I really like that. The only touring car I saw with a design like this, actually. The aluminium arms. Also, another thing, the pivot points, this distance here, a bit more than on many other cars. And I think that's also a good thing because I think they're a bit too narrow in the current cars. Wider here, more natural corner speed. True story. So this car impressed me. It was different, but different in sort of good ways. So more adjustment opportunities here because of the single link design and less weight up high. Good thing, I think. And also some different options with the length of the lower arm and offset in the wheel because of the sort of hub design. So I like that. Very cool. Very cool. So Axon was impressive. Clearly the car works because two very different driving styles made the main. The smoothest guy and the most aggressive guy with the same car, both made the main. Now, then we need to talk a bit about Infinity and Bruno. Why do I say Bruno? He was the only Infinity in the main. So where were the other guys? That's kind of how you see if a car really is good, when you don't look at the one of the best drivers and most talented guys in the world. But you look at the next guy, and where was the next guy? The B main, I think. So now, is the Infinity car going to be groundbreaking? No, I don't think so. Based on what I saw, no. It's just like the other cars. The Axon we just looked at has more unique stuff, I think, than the Infinity. Is it a good car? Yes, it is a good car. I think it will be, just as good as the other top cars, the Schumacher, what's it called? Automatics, clearly good cars. Infinity, right there. It looks very similar. So if we think about it now, okay, Bruno got second. He wasn't really a threat for the win. Even though he was sort of right there, there was still this gap. And I think the gap was there because he wasn't comfortable. Why do I say he wasn't comfortable? It was because I saw in practice and seeding and earlier on, sort of before qualifying started, I saw the issues he was having. Like he would push and spin out. He would touch a curb and, do half spin and lose the car, sort of. And I think then when the race started, sort of when qualifying started, he would just drive perfectly, but within what he could. And it was good enough to still be very strong and still have a very good result. And then, like I said, if you really want to know how well something is performing, you look at the next guy. And then those guys were sort of B main and lower. Victor Wilk was in the B, I think. Did he win the B main? And Gilles was in the B. Naoto was lower down. Naoto's in the D main, I think. He did have, I think he only finished one round. And so, like, why? What is it? What is the issue? And I think this is, I'm sorry, I always give my honest opinion, no filters. I think it's because the car is based on experience, not knowledge. Really, I think so. Because the solution to the issues that Bruno was having with the handling is not to try very different setups. No, it is to just put the car on the computer, check what the hell is going on, and put a solid base setting on the car, right? Then when you have that, then you make all the minor setup changes to dial it into the particular track. And I think that that testing that they were doing and the things they were doing was more based on experience and not that knowledge. So when I had the X-ray, this is what we did. This is the measurement of that. It's all these sort of pieces of experience applied to the car, not knowledge of the sort of DNA of the car, right? That is what I think. And I would be willing to bet on that. If you followed the race, you saw that X-Ray boys were struggling a bit too. And the reason the X-Ray boys were struggling was this very same issue. That they were trying to set their cars up purely based on experience. Okay, we have done this before. We have these different chassis materials. We have these different chassis thicknesses. We have these flex settings. We have this, we have that. But it was all like making changes which are too big and never having a base that you know and you understand, and then start making small adjustments to that base. It was only late in the race when I think David, for example, was sort of more desperate, where I said, okay, look, put this on your car, and I gave him a setup which I knew where it was, and then he listened to the changes I had him do in the next couple of runs, and then his car got to a place where it felt good. It was logical. He could finish the run. He was consistent. His best lap to average lap, the gap was small. He was, you know, had a connection to the car, but at that point it was too late, and then he was slow. And then I said, look, but now your car is logical and you know what it's doing and you can drive consistently. Now this is where you should start the race, and then we make small changes to camber, toe, bump steer, droop, all these different things to make you fast. So I think right now Infinity is in that sort of similar kind of place as X-Ray. They have all the pieces of the puzzle in a sense, but they lack the knowledge. They have the experience, but first you need to have a base of knowledge to then apply that experience, and then you can have great success. Sometimes you get lucky, but you very rarely get lucky sort of immediately. Okay, you have to test a lot, and then you stumble on something. And here's a good way for you to know if there's sort of a more fundamental problem with your base setup or the design or something like that, or if it is if it's a good design and you just have to make the right small choices with the setup. So if you have a car that works well and then you go to a different track and it's terrible, dead giveaway. There is something fundamentally wrong with the setup you are running. The reason is, when you have a good base setting on your car will always feel similar. You will always recognize it. No matter what the track condition, no matter where you go, you recognize that this is my car. You can drive your car. It's not bad. And then you make all these different setup changes you can, like piston, shock oil, diff oil, spring, anti-roll bar, slight changes to link heights or length, all the wheel alignments. And those are the changes you make from track to track. When you have a car that goes from perfect to losing the rear end a lot, or it goes from losing rear end to pushing and all these random things, that's because your roll centers, that DNA, the backbone of the car, is somehow wrong. Okay. And when I say wrong, I mean that at the limit of performance, the car fails in a sense. When you have a sensible geometry on a car, at the limit of performance, a predictable thing happens. Real cars, real passenger cars, real cars you can go and buy and drive on the street, they are designed to push. When you get into a situation, which if you live in a cold country, if you live in a country like Finland where we have snow and ice in the wintertime, you know that at the limit of handling, a car will push in a corner. It's not going to lose the rear end and do a 180 or flip over, or no. Cars are designed to, at the limit of grip, at the limit of performance, whatever you do, it will start to push. The front end will push out because it's the safest way to design a car, right? So these touring cars, you can have a setup where at the limit of performance, what you want to happen happens, right? So if your car with the same setup on different tracks, it's very different, and you're always fighting some extreme problem, you are making these changes, masking and solving a fundamental issue. And you can be successful with that on a track because your driving input, the layout, the speed, the traction level, everything, all the things you throw at that car and that setup, make it work. Now it's contained. We have contained the virus. Okay. My car is dialed. Then you go to a different track with a higher traction level and higher speeds. Shit, that fundamental issue is there again. And then you have to rework your whole setup. And it's a big mess. So this is something that you can't fake, or you can't sort of by luck land on some amazing setting. Like, I guess you could, but the probability of that is like impossible, right? If you know what you're doing and you have the geometry and you think about it and you design it, then you can get it overnight. You have that base and then you go from there. That is the difference between experience and knowledge. In off-road, I think because there are so many variables and we have bumps and dust and ruts and jumps and all this stuff, it is not as clear. It's not as clear cut. A car that is lacking somewhere with setup changes and sort of masking the issue and with driver skill, you can make up for it a lot. But in touring car, it's a flat asphalt track. A corner is around. Everyone can drive the corner the same. If you are not able to push the car comfortably to the limit, you will be slower, or you will be exhausted after 5 minutes, or your tires will be, shot. So I think I really do believe that for touring car, the things that are contained in the invisible speed book and course are more valuable, because you will be able to, by just applying these sort of very basic concepts, as long as the car is designed in a good way, which I think I will also address, giving sort of different cars a good base setting, like this is a good base setting to start from. When you have that good base setting, when you understand the basics of how the car works, why you are making these changes, you will be able to have a comfortable car on all different tracks. You will be faster. You will enjoy your racing more. And I think that it will have a bigger impact in on-road racing than off-road. That's something that I had a hunch that this was the case. And now after attending this race, now I'm sure. So on the very top level, I know that this sort of applying this knowledge helps. I proved it with Michal. I proved it with Mark. And for most people at the race who are not Michal or Mark, who are not sort of at the very top, who don't share that level of skill and talent, the difference is that for us, we will just enjoy our racing more because the cars are easier for us to drive and faster. So that's the key. In on-road, the better setup you have, you immediately see it in your lap time. And in off-road, it's not quite that way. It's different because the car performance is important, but the driving input, the driving skill is more important in a sense. So yeah, the importance of setup, I would say, the importance of understanding what changes you are doing to your car and why, it is definitely something more valuable in on-road racing. Yes. So was there some? Did I see the Mugen? Yeah, I saw the new Mugen, but you will see it when they release it. About the Mugen, it has actually been performing really well. Volker has been really good, except now at this race, he wasn't as strong as he has been recently. Was this the first asphalt race, though? I think the other races that he's been at now and he's been doing well, they've been carpet, right? Is that the difference? That's the beauty of the Mayako, I would say. The base is stable, consistent, balanced, and the possibility to move it in each direction setup need-wise is awesome. Only car I had this feeling. Yes, that is the idea. How thick front and rear sway bars are they driving in touring, and how big is the roll center gap between front and rear? People rarely talk about those combinations and time difference. So the anti-roll bars, they run at like 1.1 to 1.3, I think. And the roll bar will, the roll center gap, there's no real, there's no one right answer, but I have an answer that I feel works. But that's for me to know. So, what's next? I think that based on this experience now, first of all, I'm going to make the invisible speed setup tools for touring car. And then there are a few things that I found curious, which is there are some adjustments that don't seem to exist in touring cars. So I think I need to make a few parts also because they don't exist. And I think that they are really important and they carry significant performance and handling benefits when you can adjust them. So for on-road, for touring car, you'll have the setup tools from Invisible Speed. You will have a few option parts because they don't currently exist from Invisible Speed. And then there will be the on-road book, and there'll be more videos made for the on-road course. Mainly focused now on the sort of basic theory, and then as for roll centers, why you adjust the lower arm, why you would adjust the upper link, how to do it and when, and sort of good base settings for the main cars like Schumacher, Automatics, and X-Ray. I think that's the first steps that I'll do with Invisible Speed for on-road. And we'll also attend an ETS, hopefully the ETS in Netherlands in June. I believe that date is free. And I don't know how the outdoor ETSs are for the schedule. Hopefully better than the indoor one. I think it was the down one, which was ridiculous. There were so many people. It was such long days. That's why I really said earlier on in the video that they should batch the classes and allow for shorter days. So if you run modified, you don't have to be there all day. If you run this class, you run in the evening like that, like they did at TITC. That was really, really good. We've been going on for so long. I'm not going to talk more about theory, but I think we can have another live video later after DNC at some point, and we can look at the roll center drawing I have, and I'll explain a couple of basic things, and I'll sort of go over a bit of theory again, just because I've noticed that people talk about these things in a sort of confusing way, or not, I would say not the best way to really understand what changes to make. So load transfer and chassis movement and the difference in initial versus overall grip, and then the actual settings on the car, like when you lower the lower arm on the inside, what changes and why, what size changes should you make, upper links, same kind of things. And yeah, I think those are the first topics that we'll cover, that we'll talk about. When will we see a touring car with a JQ design on it? Well, man, if there are any touring car brands out there that want me to design a car for them, I'd be happy to. I'm not making my own. I'll make a few parts because they don't exist. That's about it. Amiibo race, yeah, carpet. Velka was in another league there compared to Michal. It was quite amazing. I think one of the big differences between this race, at least on asphalt, TITC, and carpet, is that at TITC, the cars didn't slide. There was grip, a lot of grip, right? On carpet, the cars can slide. So what is the difference? The difference is at TITC, you wanted the car to have less initial grip, more overall grip. So you have to adjust the setup to allow that car to roll and delay load transfer. But on carpet, you want the opposite. You want the car to dig in and to not slide too much and to not be too numb. You want it to be more aggressive and responsive and have a high amount of maximum traction and for the right amount of time. And I think that's the difference. And I think that the Mugen, the setup they have, they nailed it for carpet, but then they struggled. Probably, I mean, I didn't speak with them and look too much, but probably they struggled with that the grip was too high and the car was too nervous, too responsive, too much initial grip, maybe losing it then, and it was hard to drive because of that. And then for Michal, it was the opposite. Car was maybe too lazy, too loose, too sort of numb on the carpet, and then perfect TITC. So yes, I will be helping Michal now in some coming races, which will be interesting because the next race will be on carpet. So I'll learn also about what the car needs and what the changes he needs for carpet. And yeah, he didn't win the last carpet race, right? So let's see. Yeah, my issue at the race was my hands were shaking. Fuck, it was weird. My hands would start shaking so bad that I could barely drive. Someone said that chewing gum helps, and I did try, and I don't know, it didn't really help much, to be honest. I think what I need to do is I need to drive a whole lot more, so I'm used to touring car, and then maybe my hands won't shake. My next 8-scale off-road race is next week. We fly out Sunday with Pekka to America for DNC. Will you be up on a EU wrenching session in the Mayako Discord later? Probably not. Maybe just for a bit. Which current touring car design do you like the most? The Axon now, since I saw it, to be honest. I'd like to try that. And Schumacher is really good. The base setting, like when you put like sensible shims everywhere and kind of how they run it, it's very close to a really sort of theoretically this makes sense kind of setup. I think how they run the automatics is a bit off. How they run the X-ray is way off from something that makes sense to me. But the Schumacher is very close to that. It's there. So I can understand how you just run that sort of on various different tracks and it works. But the value that I think I could bring someone like Michal, for example, is that I don't think that between Q4 and A1, I do not see a world where the only change he would have made was 500,000 bump steer, and he would have been like, oh yeah, now for sure I'll be dialed. Like, I don't see that. He would have done other shit. And earlier also, the changes he would have made would have been bigger. I literally told him, like, I can't remember what run it was, but it was literally something like, just increase front toe out by a smidge. Because he was saying like, oh, the car is too hard to drive, this and that. No, just that, nothing else. And then his car was perfect. So it was like such small changes. So to know which change to make or which combination of changes to make at what time, that is key. And if that's like the value really, because you can have all the information, you can know all the stuff, but how do you know what to do and when? That is hard. That is a valuable skill, I would say, that you build over time with experience and knowledge. And that's what I can offer someone like Miha. So that will be interesting, especially now that the next race will be different on carpet. So will we see an invisible speed fix your geometry on your touring car option parts? No, the option parts will be stuff that don't exist now. And as for the setup, I think, I don't know how to do it. Like, we need to figure out a way how to do that, how to unfuck your X-ray, but put this setup on, that kind of stuff. I don't know how to do it. Camber adjustment buggies versus touring cars, do the same rules apply? Yes. Physics is physics. Same rules. See you in Manila. Yes, Philippine Masters coming up. Invisible speed setup tools. Yes, there are some universal parts. Some of the parts that we're going to make, they work for all touring cars. So have to wait on that. And off-road tools are going to be out soon, hopefully next month. And on-road tools, I have to find out, but I really want them. I really want to have the on-road tools before that ETS in Netherlands in June. But we'll see. The Schumachers need small changes and show effects very noticeably compared to X-ray, in my opinion. Schumacher will respond to 0.5 millimeter, whereas X-ray would need a bigger change to see a difference. This is kind of what I've been talking about. So when the base design of the car is good and sensible, logical, small changes make a noticeable difference. When there is something off with the design or like base of the car, some changes you don't notice anything, other changes are sensitive. And then on a particular track, in a particular condition, all the changes together that you figure out make the car work. Then when something changes, the traction level, track layout, speeds, then it's out the window again. And then you have to redo everything. Where a car with a good, sensible base, when something changes, it just changes a bit, but predictably, and you kind of know and understand what kind of setup change to make, and it's going to be a small change. So while it's good, it also becomes stressful and difficult in a different way, because now you are in a situation where a 0.2 millimeter shim placed wrong can make a noticeable difference in your lap time. So then you're stressing about that, like, which tiny change do I make and in what direction, right? So, yeah. What's your opinion of the Osmatics A800R and what problems do you see? I like it because it was the one that changed the game. Like, this touring car platform was pretty much created by Osmatics, and there's not really a problem with it. Like they have all the pieces, but like the setups they run don't make sense in a way. And I think that there is more potential to be released from that car by knowledge, not experience. So you take some more, you apply some more knowledge, and then you use your experience around that new place where you are. And then I believe that there's more potential there. And actually, RC Maker, I got that car now, and it looks really nice. I think it's the best looking car, the best looking touring car, the RC Maker SP1. And I like that it's different. It has the shocks down with the rocker arms and stuff. I looked at it already, and there are some, let's say, like some areas of improvement that I'm pretty sure that they will address or update in the future. I think the fact that Hara was so fast in practice, among the fastest, and even in the race then, and, was in the B main, could have maybe even been in the A. And the French guy, is he French? He also had some pace. I think that kind of showed that the car works. Okay, they have something good going. I want to get the geometry of that and sort of take a look at that and then give it a try also. But that car interests me also. So the Axon, the RC Maker, them I want to try. I have an X-Ray and I have a Schumacher and I have the old automatics. I kind of need the new one, but I don't really have time. So, and also it has those shocks which are good, yes, because they are low CG, but the hassle to build and all that. I don't want to get into that shit. Okay, so yeah, Schumacher, X-Ray, RC Maker, Axon. Those 4 cars I want to take a look at. Thanks for the valuable live stream. You are welcome. Now we need to end because it's been 2 hours. What the fuck? It was supposed to be 1. What else? Anything else? We need a last question. What is your thought about flex settings in such a high grip track? Flex in touring car is so weird because it's like the more flex and less screws you run, the better it will be. It's pretty much always. It's so weird. Honestly, I don't know enough about flex settings yet because it's still too irrational and confusing to me. So I really need to test more. But it has, like, the flex has to do with initial grip and the balance of initial grip front and rear, and also how forgiving the car is. So it's complicated. But what I know, like, let's say from carpet racing, when you have more screws in the chassis and the motor mount and top decks and stuff, and you can adjust everything and try all kinds of stuff, and you feel like, oh, you got the car good, then you just remove like 2 screws off the top deck and just leave 1 screw in the motor mount, and suddenly you go like a 10th faster lap and more consistently. It's like, what, like, why? So yeah, I definitely need to test more with the flex stuff. Please help X-Ray design the 26 model. JQ help needed. Okay. X-Ray was the first car I had, and I did give them some ideas through Hogberry, which I think that some have been actually implemented that just don't know they were my ideas. I mean, I definitely could help them, but I don't want to really if I don't benefit in some way. I think with buggy, you can slightly balls up the setup and still drive around it. With touring car, if you get things the slightest setup bit wrong, it can be undrivable. Yeah, but even more than that, if you get the setup wrong and the car is still easy to drive, but in touring car, it can just be slow and you cannot drive around that. Like if your car is slow because of something to do with the setup, a good driver can't drive it faster in touring car. But in off-road, they can. That's kind of a difference also. Like if you have in off-road a setup that's a bit slow, in off-road, the driver can make it go faster by driving more aggressively and throwing the car around a bit and like driving it faster. But in touring car, you can't do that really. So that's also one reason why I like and why I really enjoyed the experience, because I could immediately see the impact I could have. I could think about something and figure like this will be faster because of that. We could do it and then it would be faster, and there's like a direct feedback there between what you do with a setup and then a really good driver goes on the track and boom, he's faster, or boom, he doesn't fade as much in 5 minutes. I really like that. Well, I answered that question just now. Did you enjoy touring races environment? Yeah, TITC was awesome. Isn't the flex something like a car would have an anti-roll bar from front to rear? Well, that's one way of thinking about it, I guess. Yeah. On off-road, when do you run high roll center versus low roll center? Well, I would say like higher or lower. On high grip, you would run lower, and on low grip, you would run higher. That's one way of thinking about it. Because on high grip, you want the car to be in the track and not flip over and be more calm, less responsive. And then on low grip, you need grip. You want more initial grip. And you can get that with a higher roll centers. So yeah, you can think about it like that. And the same applies for on-road. And the key also is, then we'll talk about it later in various other lives, is how you achieve that with the lower arm or the upper link and why. There's also different lines in off-road. Yes, not always the sort of optimum racing line. Asimeka SP1, I talked about that. The higher the grip, the more critical the setup is. Well, I think it's both. It's always critical, I would say. Okay, there we go. Enjoyed talking about setup too much. E-buggy. E-buggy, that is the cue to end the stream. Okay. We will talk about touring cars another time. The next time we'll talk about DNC, and then after that, touring cars, I think. Again, there's more stuff we need to figure out here with the setups. Okay. Cool. Okay. Goodbye.